My simple definition of authenticity is creating safe, physically and psychologically safe spaces where people are allowed to bring them full selves to that environment, right? Whether that be a community or a workspace or a family. And when I say they're full selves, they're good, they're bad, they're ugly, they're warts, they're talents, they're opportunities.
Welcome once again. It's Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I'm your host, Russell Lolliker, a communications and leadership expert, a couple of decades of experience in both those areas, and a whole heap of curiosity, just like yourself, on how we can make the workplace a better place. Authenticity. We throw it around a lot. A lot of words we throw around in the leadership space, in the workplace culture as it is. I remember having a boss once. This is back in my service days. I was a bartender many years. And there was a guy, great to sit around as a leader, as a boss, to sit around with, have a drink with, talk with. Completely different person when I was working for them. If we were off hours, very cordial, very encouraging, really nice person. But you flick that switch and he had that power over me. And suddenly he was just a completely different person. I don't want to say tyrant. That's a tough word. But I don't know how authentic he was because I saw him as one person and I also saw him as another. I don't know what your experience is. Have you found people to be different in one meeting to the next? Are they adapting or are they being inauthentic? It's really hard to tell sometimes. And our focus this week is going to be about authentic leadership. An expert, Jim Fielding, who wrote a book on the subject, he's got some pretty interesting experience in his own journey in leadership, some pretty big name organizations he's worked in and had some success in as well. And so he's really interested in this authenticity and what it looks like, and also the success he's had in making sure that he was his full authentic self in the workplace. And I'm, pretty excited to share this week's conversations with you. And let's get over and talk to Jim. Hold on. And on the show, we have Jim Fielding, and here is why he is awesome. He's an executive coach, professional speaker, and author. He's bringing 30 years of experience in leadership roles at globally renowned companies such as 20th Century Fox, DreamWorks Animation, and Disney Store Worldwide. He has a national bestseller with his book, All Pride, No Ego, a queer executive's journey on living and leading authentically. And it's that last word that we're going to be digging in today, and he's here with us as well. Hello, Jim.
Hello. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're going to get authentic. We're going to dig deep into it. Before we do any of that, Jim, I have to ask you the one question I ask all of my guests to kick this off, which is, what is your, sir, best or worst employee experience?
My best employee experience was being president of Disney Store, for sure, from 2008 to 2012. And I was managed correctly. The person I was working for led me correctly. He was a great boss. His name is Andy Mooney. And the team that I was able to put together and the mission and vision we were on, it was probably the best time in my career for feeling like everybody was kind of rowing in the same direction and we knew what we were trying to accomplish. In fact, I posted a video about it this week that I found on YouTube from 14 years ago. And it was just nice to reconnect with a lot of those cast members from that.
So I'm going to get you to drill down just a little bit more because, those are great. They're very rare, actually, for a lot of people when they're trying to find direction, when they're trying to find a team that speaks their language. Mm-hmm. So what do you feel like leadership did for you there that provided that experience?
Well, it's interesting because I was in that position for 4 years. I had Andy Mooney for 3 years and another leader for 1 year, which is part of the worst story, which we can get into if you want to. But Andy was really good. He was the kind of leader who set very clear goals, very clear expectations, and got out of your way. Like, he was not a micromanager, right? He knew he had hired me to be a president of Disney Store, gave me that job. And so he gave me qualitative and quantitative goals and then basically was like, if you need me, you know where I am. But I think the other thing he was, and when you work at a company the size of Disney, and any of your listeners that have worked there or known someone that's worked there, you need a boss who has your back, frankly, right? Because it's a political, and most big corporations have politics, but Disney definitely is a political organization. And so I was doing a lot with Disney Store. I was reinventing Disney Store. Disney had bought the Disney Store back from an outside licensee. And I was put into this job with a very large budget, but also very high expectations. Basically, between you and me, don't F it up, right? Make money, but make it a good experience, make it a brand experience, the whole bit. And I felt that pressure. And the only way I got through it is that Andy had my back the entire time. Because let's face it, we made mistakes. There was things we didn't do. And for your listeners, and Russell, I took over in May of 2008. The global mortgage crisis, the financial impact was September 2008. So here I am, the new president of Disney Store, 3 or 4 months in, building a team, and the business dropped out, like 50% drops. And luckily, Bob Iger, who was the CEO of Disney, Andy Mooney, who was my boss, the board stuck with it, right? Because they could have easily pulled the plug and said, we're not going to spend this money. It's a horrible time to be in retail. And they kept us going. And so what that did for me was give you that adrenaline boost to be like, I'm going to figure this out. I felt supported. I felt enabled. And I say, when you talk about authenticity, they got the best of Jim Fielding. Like, they got me 24/7, and I was pushing myself and pushing the team. And I think we did things with Disney Store that had never been done before.
It really hammers home the importance that leaders need great leaders too. We can't
of course.
But and sadly, it's not as of course. Like we treat leaders like, go out and figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll help you with your management. We'll help you with delivery. But it's that motivation, inspiration, direction, all the shuns, like all the things that really a leader needs, so they know which way to point the boat. And that's a great example of that.
Yeah, and he was really good. I mean, it's interesting to bring that up, Russell, because he was really good at course correction. That's another shun, right? If he thought I was veering the wrong way or we weren't going in the right direction, he was good at giving me feedback. And I have always said my entire life, and it's interesting that I'm a coach now, I'm coachable. I've always been coachable. I've always accepted feedback. It doesn't mean it was easy. It doesn't mean there weren't times that I was like, that was horrible feedback. I don't agree. But I am coachable, and he understood that. And he understood that it took small course corrections. It wasn't sweeping, call me into the office and, you've completely messed this up and you need to change everything and fire 50 people. He would never be like that, but it would be, he'd plant seeds. He understood planting seeds of, maybe you should look at that differently. And our offices were about 20 minutes apart in 2 different Disney buildings. And that 20-minute drive back to my office from his office, I'd always be ruminating the entire time of like, what did he mean by that? What did that really mean? And I would make a correction and that was perfect, because that was like slightly turning my head. You know what I mean? It wasn't slapping me down and saying, you really screwed that up. It was like, how about you think of this differently, Jim? Think of it from a slightly different angle. And I appreciated that tremendously.
Empowerment with direction. It's that's the sweet sauce there, Jim.
Totally. And support to make mistakes. I think that's the other thing, Russell. Like we made mistakes. He didn't call me and be like, well, that was dumb, because he knew that I was beating myself up first anyway. I didn't need him. But he also would call and say, that's okay. You took a swing and it was a miss. Like, you don't, we used to, I mean, he had come from Nike, so he was a sports guy. Luckily, I love sports too. And he'd do a lot of, well, you went for the home run and you should have gone for a single. There was a lot of those kind of conversations. And I got it, right? Like, you went for the 3-point shot, you should have gone for the layup. That made sense to me. I was like, okay, I got it.
Well, Jim, for this episode, we like to set the table. We like to get a little clarity. And with our topic today being about authenticity, I think the most important thing we need to do to start off is defining what the hell we're even talking about. Because what one person thinks is authentic could be very different from another. Yeah. So let's make sure we're singing from the same song sheet here. How do you define authenticity, especially in relation to leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I really give full credit to Brene Brown because I use a version of her definition. I think, her TED talk from like 2012, I think it is, on authenticity really stuck with me. And to me, my simple definition of authenticity is creating safe, physically and psychologically safe spaces where people are allowed to bring them full selves to that environment, right? Whether that be a community or a workspace or a family. And when I say their full selves, they're good, they're bad, they're ugly, they're warts, they're talents, they're opportunities. It's really, you accept the person unconditionally. And it's all rooted for me, and we've talked before, Russell, it's all rooted for me in storytelling, in that everybody has a unique story, right? Like, even though we're all human beings, we all have unique DNA, we all have a unique story. And to me, I always wanted, as a leader, to create that environment where they got to live their full story, because my theory was that that meant I got the best productivity out of them. If they weren't worrying about playing a role or not being themselves, then that freed up their mind to be innovative and creative. And they actually enjoyed coming to work. And I think authentic leadership is very human-centered leadership. And I think it's an offshoot of servant leadership, actually, where I always felt it was the leader's job to set that tone and to set that environment. In the olden days, it would have been called situational leadership, meaning not everybody needed to be managed exactly the same way, that you as a leader had to identify and modify yourself to bring the best out of a team. And I think that works if your team is 3 people, 30, 300, or, I had teams up to 10,000. I mean, so I really felt that it was my job, and it's actually my executive team's job, to create to create that culture of authenticity.
So what are we getting wrong? Because we throw authenticity around like it's a keyword or an SEO exercise. So what are we getting wrong with this definition?
I mean, I think some people, and I get asked this a lot, like on the tour and on my speaking gigs. By the way, there are degrees of authenticity, right? There are, I always talk about like having a code switcher on my arm, right? Of that I read a room and I read a situation, deciding like how authentic I'm going to go. And that doesn't mean I'm being inauthentic. It just means, again, sometimes you need to set boundaries about how much you're going to share. Sometimes it's inappropriate for certain workspaces or certain cultures to share your full story. Some people are uncomfortable with the full story or the emotions. Again, I think you have to adapt. And I think what we tend to get wrong in authentic leadership is everybody treats it as very black or white, like on or off. And I actually think it's gray. And I think all great leaders and managers know you are leading in the gray, and that you have to adapt and change as circumstances change, as your team changes. And I think the culture, like the foundation of your culture, can be there, but your culture changes every time you bring on a new hire, every time you change a department or an org structure. And I like it because, to me, the culture is a living organism, right? Because it's made up of human beings. Human beings have challenges. Human beings change. Human beings grow. Human beings have different needs. Again, you need to adapt. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make with authentic leadership, is like, I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to be on 100 all day. And I'm like, no, that's not the way it is. Like, there's shades, there's a lever. A lot of it gets wrapped up in that I had a bias in hiring, right? Oh, I only want to hire. I mean, I remember people saying, oh, Jim only wants to hire cheerleaders or extroverts. And I'm like, what? No way. Like, I want everybody. And by the way, everybody thinks I'm an extrovert. I'm actually an ambivert. I'm an extrovert and introvert. I need my introvert time as much as any. I'm not a full introvert. And I'm really proud when I look back at my teams, especially the last 10 or 15 years of my career, that you would look at my team and we looked unique. We looked different. And I loved that kind of stew of everybody having different points of view and different experiences and different backgrounds. I loved that, especially when you're in I was always in consumer facing industries. So I felt it was important to be representative.
Is diversity a measuring stick? So I'm kind of curious that from authenticity,
Yeah.
even with shades, what is your level of knowing that this organization's authentic, or I know this team is being authentic?
Hmm.
How do we know?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think part of what we're going through right now in diversity or DEI is this performative of like counting. And I personally never liked that counting thing. I always tried to talk about representation. And I basically wanted to look around a room, and in diversity, there's visible diversity and there's invisible diversity. And I always wanted to look around a room of employees or a team and say, is there a diversity of thought? Is there a diversity of experience? Is there a diversity of background? Because again, I thought that mixture brought the best results out, particularly again in creative consumer facing industries. I think if people thought diversity was counting like how many of a certain race you had, or how many of a certain gender you had, or how many of a certain sexuality you had, that's when it became very performative and very, frankly, people got angry about that. I think it's more about, to me, I see diversity or belonging inclusion cultures as a competitive advantage because the and a business imperative, because the employee pool that you're pulling from, particularly for me, I spent most of my career in California. If I tried to hire a certain gender or race only, I wouldn't have had a pool to pull from. I mean, I wouldn't, and my thing, and I think any hiring manager says, I wanted the best and the brightest. I wanted the most innovative, the most intelligent, the most experienced. And that was, I was colorblind, I was gender blind, I was gender identification blind, because I was going for the best and the brightest. And to me, and I'm working really hard right now, Russell, as you know, to try and get this story out of whatever DEI 2.0 is going to be, because DEI, even though, everybody says they're rolling it back and people aren't doing it, you have no choice. If you're going to be a leader, particularly in the United States, we're only getting more diverse. We're not getting less diverse. We're just not.
This is where I struggle a bit with authenticity and terms like bringing your full self to work.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with it in practice, but what if your full self is an asshole? Like authentically, people can be horrible. They can be, I'm bringing my full self. I'm just saying it like it is. Right?
1,000%. I love this question, Russell. And you're not the first person to ask me this. I get asked this a lot on the road. By the way, being an asshole or doing something unethical or doing something illegal, and you can't sit there and say, well, that's authentic. I'm going to cook the books. That's my authenticity. That's not, no. I mean, that is a performance issue. That is indication. And by the way, I addressed performance issues my entire career. I put people on performance improvement plans. I fired people for not performing their job correctly, and I laid people off. I mean, honestly, when you worked at Disney, we reorged every year, whether we were up 20% or down 20%. And so I learned how to manage reductions in force, and I learned how to, but you do not accept, that's not an acceptable answer for bad behavior. That's just pure bad behavior. And it's like, that's fine. If that's your 100% identity, first off, you probably weren't a right hire. And I would say in that case, like, I would have tried to pick that up in the recruiting and the interviewing. But no, it does not give you, and it does not give you a right, even though I believe in freedom of speech and stuff, you can't go around a building and be a bully and tell people they're not worthy or they're doing their job wrong. That doesn't work either. I mean, there are fundamental rules of working on a team and fundamental rules of working for companies that are foundational to team success that have nothing to do with authenticity. And that might be your authenticity. Some people are meaner than other people. But again, you better learn how to control it in a work environment, or you won't be part of the team.
It also goes back to definitions. What's mean to you might not be mean to somebody else. It might just be direct. It might be, yeah.
Yeah, and I think as a leader, you know this, Russell, if I was having that issue with somebody, it's not that I'm just walking in and firing them. I would be sitting down with them and saying, what is going on? Why are you walking around the office being so difficult to work with? Is there something fundamentally going on that we need to understand, that we need to fix, right? There may be a systemic problem, or maybe there's something going on at home that I don't know about, but you're bringing it into the office. And if you're comfortable with sharing it, I want to help you. particularly if it's a behavior change, right? If you've had an employee for 2 years and all of a sudden their behavior changes, again, it's your job to try and get into it without violating their confidentiality, without putting them in an awkward position. But to me, authenticity in the cultures I built, and I'm so glad you brought this up, it starts with the recruiting process and it starts in the interview process, right? It's as you're building the team. Because if you hire someone who is an individual contributor and they've been an individual contributor their entire life, and then you put them in and say, I want you to work on a team of 10, that's not being fair to them, because that's, again, their authenticity is they like to work in a cubicle and do their job, and they don't really want to work on a team. But if the job you're hiring for requires team work and team building, then you probably didn't hire correctly.
That's it. We got a bit of clarity on relationships at work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I'm Russell Lolliker. Every Monday, we focus on our topic, but the focus is clarity, definitions. That's every Monday. Every Tuesday, we get into self. And that's going to happen tomorrow. The relationship we have with ourselves, especially around authentic leadership. I think that'll be an interesting topic to talk to Jim about, and I look forward to sharing that with you. If you've enjoyed the podcast so far and enjoying, the value, your own leadership journey and how this may have helped, love to hear from you. I'd love hello@russellolliker.com. That's my email address. I don't use it that often because I don't email me often, but hello@russellolliker.com. Love to hear your insights if it's working for you. If it's not, any feedback you have, love to hear about it. And we're all on a leadership journey, and this is both of ours as we listen to these conversations. So I look forward to hearing from you. And I also look forward to joining you again tomorrow. Take care.